I love vintage lenses. I just never really enjoyed using zoom lenses. But I saw this 35 to 105mm Canon FD f3.5 that was available for a really good price online, and I decided to let my prejudice not dictate all my decisions, and I bought the lens. Let's have a look at this lens. Now, I use the lens in a variety of situations, in a music video along with some other FD lenses, and it spent way more time on my camera than I anticipated it ever would. I even used it on the comparison video that I did with the Danie film emulation, and I've shot it on my AE with film. And yeah, so I'll put a link in the description and the end screen to that Danie film emulation video that I did. I'm out here in the silver mine, and I am running the Canon FD 35 to 105 f3.5 through its paces. But let's quickly get through the basic specs of this lens, and then we can see it in action. Type. This is a zoom lens for the full frame 135 format. Operation is manual aperture and manual focus. The origin is April 1981 in Japan. This was first released. The mount is the Canon FD, the new FD mount, so not the breech lock version. It has a two-touch focus and zoom, so each has its own rings. Zoom has a ring and focus has a ring. It's not a push-pull. The focal length is 35mm to 105mm. The aperture is a 5-blade aperture. It has an f3.5 to f22 range. The optics is 15 elements in 13 groups, and the coating is super spectra coated. The closest focusing distance is 1.5 meters, and it's more or less parfocal, more or less. The macro closest focusing distance I've found to be about 10 centimeters, more or less. The size is 76.5 by 108 millimeters. The weight is 600 grams. It's not light. Filter thread 72 millimeters, and the build is metal, some plastic and rubber, and obviously glass. And the price I've seen is between $60 and $110. Quite a wide gamut of prices. Now let's have a look at some of the footage and images that I shot with this lens. Now, my experience of the lens is generally positive, but let's delve a bit deeper. My lens, my copy of the lens, is in pretty decent nick. It's actually very good nick for a 44-year-old, 3-year-old camera. It has no fungus, scratches, or any loose barrel issues. According to the date stamp at the back, it should be a 1981. If you don't know how I know that, please check out this little video that I'll link in the end screen, where it explains how you date your Canon lens. The lens handles extremely well, and it plays well with the Canon AE1 obviously, but also my Canon mirrorless cameras using the FD-R adapter. Now, with the focus, throw and zoom wheels both moving smoothly, it just works really easy. It's just got enough resistance, and focus throw, you probably have like a 80-degree focus throw, I would imagine, I'm just guessing. The macro feature is really useful on a lens that already covers a fair amount of ground in its focal length. But the macro feature, I would say, is sure it's macro, but it's not a true one-to-one macro system. Other performances, the lens flares quite easily, and especially at its widest focal length. The flare isn't very pretty to my eyes, and it isn't immediately recognizable like some other cameras would have, like this very recognizable flare or flare balls. Yet I'm not crazy about shooting this lens into direct light sources, because I don't think it necessarily plays to its strengths, and sometimes the image can become a bit hazy, but with well-controlled backlight, it actually handled fine. And in some instances, like the music video, it definitely added a bit of atmosphere, and so I wouldn't write it off completely. I think it has a fair use in that situation. The lens vignettes quite obviously, but not objectionably. In the mid-range of apertures, it's pretty much gone, but when you're wide open, definitely, even if you zoom out. Fringing, ghosting, and other forms of aberrations are honestly very minimal for a zoom lens with this many elements. There's obviously a falling off of some sharpness at maximum aperture especially. People tend to make a big deal about diffraction at the really small apertures, saying you can't shoot at f22 or 16. I found this to perform really well at f11 and even f16, and if you're shooting video, f22 can still work. In fact, I have used it at f22 and it was actually okay. Again, bearing in mind this is a zoom lens with a lot of glass elements whenever you consider these things. The bokeh is ultimately just out of focus background blur. It's mostly dependent on the subject matter and the type of lighting, but nothing about the bokeh in this lens or the way it renders bothers me. I think it's quite pleasing. Overall, however, especially in the center across all apertures, this lens is very sharp. Around the center, very, very sharp. In fact, very sharp for a zoom lens of this age. When you shoot wide, there's obviously a little bit of barrel distortion, but it's not something that I notice. Shooting at 35mm, you expect a little bit of curvature. As always, I am quite loath to comment on color rendition outside of a strict testing environment, but the colors, to my very subjective eye, is definitely less saturated than any RF or modern equivalent, but it's still quite punchy and contrasty, and possibly a bit warmer than the newer lenses. If you wish to use words such as cinematic or such, yeah, sure, whatever. You can call the lens, I suppose, cinematic, but it's not a particularly quirky lens. It's actually it doesn't have a recognizable quirky look, and which in my opinion is a good thing because you can use it for more things, but it does have that vintage quality. Since focusing is accomplished with the aperture wide open, I did now and again when I'm shooting at 35mm, and I find that with some 50mm as well, that's really fast, that it's sometimes hard to see if you made focus, especially with subjects in the distance. However, it is a more or less parfocal lens, so knowing the focus stays constant throughout the zoom range is quite amazing. So even if there is a little bit of adjustment you need to make, it's quite small. It's not like you need to refocus the whole image right from the start. Now, a gripe I have is the front element moves or rotates when you focus, which makes using a matte box that attaches to the filter thread like the Lee system I use a bit tricky because it turns with the lens. In terms of focusing, a follow focus will obviously make things easier when you're shooting video. Using a polarizer on this requires you to reset or readjust the polarizer every time you adjust focus, because the polarizer turns with the front element of the lens, and this can be a bit of a pain. It's an extra adjustment. People complain about the weight, but I find it rests easy and it isn't too much of a drag for me, but I don't mind heavy gear in general, so it's not a pain for me. In conclusion, this lens is got a fantastic range that it covers, and it's since then made a permanent home with my Canon AE1. It's really useful when I'm shooting video on mirrorless and I want to have an FD look and I want to travel light, or just for running, gunning, or if I'm out with my family. and I want to shoot some film shots, you know, just Canon AE1 body with this lens and you're set for the day. So I do like this lens. I've seen some hate for it online, and as far as the FD lenses go, obviously the primes are prime and supreme, but this is a really good zoom alternative if you just want to have a slightly more compact photographic setup. I will put a couple of links down below. There will be affiliate links, so if you buy one of these lenses, I'll get a little bit of something. I'll also list some of the other gear that I use and discuss. If you like this video, please press like, subscribe, please. I like reading your comments. Please, if anything, just comment on the videos. I like to learn from you guys, and also if you have questions, if I can't answer it, I'm sure somebody else in the comment section will. But that's it for now, and I'll see you in the next video.